Hello, this is Shafali again. This is Sophie, who is our Siberian cat. Thought I'd just introduce her. She's come to join us for my talk today. Welcome. Today I'm going to do a talk. I think it could be longer than I expected, so I'm a bit humbled by that because I thought I could roll a talk out in 20 minutes and under, but I discovered it's a little bit harder when I was doing a time check. So today's talk is going to be about taking risks. And my question, which I'm going to start off with, is: are you a risk taker or are you risk averse? And is it that black and white? So we all understand risks in different ways. For some people, stepping out the front door is a risk, and because that's, they find that too threatening. And for other people, speaking to somebody or speaking to a stranger is taking a risk. For other people, doing a talk is a risk too much. So we all have different ideas as to what risks are and whether we should or shouldn't take them. So when I'm talking about risks, I'm going to be talking a bit about the story of Esther. It will be a condensed version and maybe a little bit of artistic license. I have got a few notes, but I'm going to try and be as note-free as possible. Now, when I'm talking about risk, quick disclaimer here, I'm not talking about should I take these drugs, should I have unprotected sex, or should I jump off a cliff. I'm not talking about those kind of risks. I'm talking about, well, I suppose risks like doing a skydive. So when I was a medical student, we were offered, the whole of our year was offered to do a skydive, and it was only aimed at medical students. I don't know why that was. Genuinely, I don't. The military obviously thought that medical students were crazy enough to want to do that kind of a thing. And I was like, oh, this sounds exciting. Let's go and do that. And they gave us a morning of training. This was going to be a static line, so it was not in tandem. It was not strapped to somebody else, and it was only going to be from 5,000 feet. The thing is, we needed to know, first of all, that we wouldn't get insurance because it was considered to be too dangerous. And the other thing is that when they told us to jump, we had to jump. We couldn't really delay. And I thought, oh no, I'll be fine. That's great. So we got up there, 5,000 feet, aeroplane in all our gear. And it came to my turn, and I was looking out, and he said, you should go now. And I looked down and I was like, no way am I going to jump into thin air. No way am I going to do that. He said, right, I'm going to count to 3. 1, push. And I screamed for the full 10 seconds as I was free falling before the parachute opened. And when the parachute opened, it was great because suddenly it was like, oh yes, good. I had to check that because the reserve parachute would have had to be pulled. And the view and the vista was outstanding. It was amazing. I had never been in the air and coming down to earth rather rapidly, actually, in that situation, and it was absolutely awe-inspiring. Now, obviously, that is a risk for pleasure and experience. Not all those. That's whether you consider that an okay kind of risk to take is dependent on you. I also like driving fast cars as well. But it's to do with a sense of fear, of where you kind of want to do something, and yet when faced with it, it's you want to just bottle it and run away. And speaking to those lovers of Jesus who have a prophetic gift, they go into this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. We go into a meeting, you get a prophetic word that you want to share, and you're sitting there and you're going sweaty and you're going, I should really give this. And then what happens is that somebody else gets up and gives the very word that you've not been able to give. And the thing with that is that you feel so disappointed that actually that could have been you, and you'd have felt that you'd been used by God, and that would have been really encouraging for you. Okay, so Esther. Esther is in the Bible. Her book is in the Old Testament. It's 8 very short chapters, and it's between Nehemiah and Job. If you want to, and I recommend that you read it for yourself, because I'm just literally going to dip in and paraphrase a bit. Esther was a young Jewish woman who was living in Babylon with her older cousin Mordecai, who was a bit like he was a surrogate father for her, because her parents had both been killed, so she was orphaned at a very young age, and Mordecai brought her up. So they had a very close relationship. Mordecai was concerned about Esther because she was a Jew living in an alien community. They were under they're in exile in Babylon. So he said to Esther, out of concern for her, look, Esther, don't look. Well, her actual name was Hadassah, and he said, Hadassah, don't go around calling yourself Hadassah, because people will then know you're a Jew. I want you to call yourself Esther. This is for your protection. That's what you need to do. And that's what she did. She called herself Esther. We start the story when the king is holding a massive banquet because he'd had some victories in various places. And he was at the time married to Queen Vashti, who was very, very beautiful and lovely and very, very desirable. He'd got his men in this wonderful banquet, and he suddenly thought, oh, do you know what? I want to show off my queen. I want to get her over to us, and so all the guys can see what beautiful wife I have. The thing is, she was having a girls' night in as well. So he was having the lads round for this big victory banquet, and she was having a girls' night in. And so she disobeyed the king, not perhaps a very clever thing to do, disobeyed the king and said, no, I'm not coming. And she didn't really give a reason. She said, I'm just not coming. So the king asked for advice as to what does he do when his queen doesn't obey him, and his advisor said, well, look, if she doesn't obey you, then that's not very good. It's showing that you're not really in control of your household, and that will have repercussions throughout the whole of your province. So he says, oh, what am I going to do? They said, oh, well, just don't allow her into your presence anymore. So fortunately, they were civilised enough to not do the Henry VIII thing. She was not beheaded, which is a good thing. She was just not allowed into his presence. So then his advisor said to him, right, what you need another queen to take Vashti's place. So the king said, right, what I want you to do then is I want you to go out into all my province and bring in a number of attractive young virgins, and bring them here to the palace, and we'll see if I can choose a queen from them. Now, I suppose when you read the story, it kind of sounds a little bit, oh, well, that's nice. They just went out and got a few virgins and they came in and it was great. I think actually I think it may well have been a little bit more brutal than that, because these girls were not given any choice, and they were kind of a bit rounded up and kind of probably brought to the palace not really knowing exactly what was going to happen to them. So they could have been mistreated, they could be raped, they probably didn't know. And Esther was amongst those young women. And Esther was known to be very, very beautiful. So she knew that she was attractive to men. And she got into the palace. And the interesting thing is that throughout all of that time, when we're reading about it, it looks to me like Esther did not panic. Now, Esther is one of the books in the Bible, is one of the only books in the Bible that does not mention God. But I reckon she must have had a faith in God sufficient for her to not to panic when faced with potential mistreatment and goodness knows what. So much so, when it came to her turn to go and see the king, she took the advice of the eunuch who was looking after these young women about what gift to have and what she should take to the palace to meet the king. So she went to the palace, and the all we're told is we don't know what the king did and what kind of time they spent together, but we know that she found favour in his eyes, and in fact he preferred her to all the other young women that came, which is quite a thing. So she must have been somebody who he felt was queen material, as well as being respectful to him. Of course, Esther had not revealed at this point that she was a Jew. So this was all done with the king thinking she was part of his province, but nobody particularly from a special community. So while she was, so she did in fact marry her, and she became Queen Esther. And the story goes that for a period of time they were very close, but then she seemed to have not gone into the king's presence for a while. And while that was happening, and we don't know why she didn't go into the king's presence, an edict was brought out by one of his men to contrive to have all the Jewish people under their authority basically killed. So it was going to be a mass genocide of the Jewish people, and only the Jewish people. So Esther's uncle Mordecai sent a message to her saying, "Esther, you're the queen. You've got the King Xerxes' ear, and you found favour with him. You need to go and plead for our people and for mercy, because we're all going to die here." Now, I think Mordecai, he loved Esther. He loved her like his own daughter, and the thing is, he was asking her, really, he knew that she had not been in the king's presence for a while, and the thing is, in Babylonian law, if you hadn't been in the king's presence, he had not invited you to spend time with him. If you went uninvited, that was under penalty of death, unless he extended the golden scepter to you, and you wouldn't know, because obviously if he hasn't been seeing you, then he might be a bit displeased with you, and you wouldn't know which way it was going to go. So Esther says to Mordecai, "Look, Daddy," kind of thing. You do understand what you're asking me, don't you? You're asking me to go before King Xerxes when I've not been in his presence, and he's not invited me to go into his presence and plead for our people. And Mordecai said, yeah. She said, that comes, if I go in uninvited, I could be killed. And so this is a really serious deal. So Mordecai comes to her, and this is a famous bit, and he says, "Yes, Esther, absolutely, you could die, and I know that is a risk, and I'm feeling that risk too. But the thing is, if you don't do it, first of all, we're all going to die, and secondly, God will raise up somebody else to do it in your stead." So Esther says, "Right, okay, big decision here. There's a time limit. There's a date set for the massacre." So she says to Mordecai, "Right, look, tell all the people, all the Jewish people, to pray and fast for 3 days." And so they didn't eat or drink for 3 days, and she said, "I'll do the same." And after that 3 days, they came back, and she said, "Right, this is it. Now I'm just going to go to see the king, and if I die, I die. So she put on her best makeup, and probably with a heart beating, it's a bit like jumping out of that plane kind of thing. When she opened the doors into his court, I imagine, she was probably thinking, I don't know, this is not going to end well. I'm absolutely terrified. I'm totally in God's hands, and I'm actually in the king's hands as well, and he's Babylonian. And so she went in, and the king put his scepter forward because he favoured her. And he said, okay, come on, Esther. Look, don't kill her, guys. I want to find out what this is about. She's come to see me when I've not seen her for a while. I want to know what it's about. So he says, okay, so Esther, what is it? What do you want from me? And so this is the second moment when she's got through the main barrier. She's gone into the presence of the king, and she's not dead. And very often most of us would just stand there. Well, I would just stand there and go, well, I'm not dead. That's good. And I would have probably gone and blurted it all out. Oh, well, my people are going to die. Can you do something, please, king? But she didn't do that. She kept her head, and she said, and she thought about it. She must have thought about it enough to say, you know what we're going to do is, please, can you come to my house and have a nice meal, please? And we'll discuss it. And so the king was like, cool, that sounds good to me. So he went with his general, who'd wanted the Jews to be killed. He went for this first banquet, and in that banquet he turned round to her and he said, so right, Esther, what's the deal? What's going on? Why did you take that big risk? What do you want from me? And she says, well, what I really want from you is, can you come back and we'll have another banquet? And it feels almost as though she was kind of just strengthening herself for the big reveal. The big reveal being two things. One is she was Jewish, and he had signed an edict to wipe out the whole of her people in the land. So it was a bit of a double whammy there. So he came back to the second banquet and he asked her, and then she did in fact say, if I have any favour with you, can you please spare my people? She owned being Jewish, my people, because you see, I'm Jewish. My name, she probably said, my name really isn't Esther, it's Hadassah. That's my real name, that's who I really am. And the king acceded to her wishes. And so her people, the Jewish people, were saved. She was recognised as being Jewish. He honoured her though, her and her uncle Mordecai, and instead of them being made outcasts or relegated, she was elevated. So I imagine that King Xerxes probably saw that this woman that he had chosen to be his wife was a worthy queen, and the history books has said that she reigned for quite a while, and she actually ran his provinces for him when he went out to war. He entrusted her with ruling in his stead. So I think that's a very poignant story. It tells us that this was a young woman who was very courageous. She'd had a traumatic childhood. She was very courageous, and she carried out the task that was given to her. So what am I going to say here? So the bottom line is, I think, and this is our challenge, we need, for our own benefit, to take the risk of trusting God. Esther must have trusted God with the outcome. That's why she prayed and fasted. That he will bring us back to his path in spite of our mistakes. Even if she had blurted it out, she would have trusted that God would have sorted it. But actually God instead gave her presence of mind right in that moment, grace at the time of need. In our head, a risk feels like, if we're wrong, if it could go all bad, and we could fail, and failure is very frightening. If we're wrong, we could make a bad situation worse. She could have made that situation worse by saying she was Jewish and these were Jewish people. And these are very fair points. We could. And the thing is, if you're in a bad situation, the last thing you want to do is make it worse, because bad situations can always be made worse. Alternatively, if we entrust God with the risk and say, okay, and we look at it in reality and we say, if I die, I die. This is a real risk. We're not saying that's not going to happen. We're saying, look, this is the risk, but I'm going to take it. The outcome, the potential outcome is worth it. I put myself into your hands, God. If God cares enough that he knows the number of hairs on our head and that they're always changing, and it's a lot of hair, then surely he's got the rest. And he can also get us out of pickles, big pickles and small pickles. So if you want to take a risk and you think it is worth taking, I would suggest that consider it, take some time and put yourself in the best position. That's what Esther did. Get help, pray, and maybe fast, and then entrust yourself to God. I think Esther is a very simple story, really. There are some complex bits in it, but actually this is a story of somebody who trusted God, and a young woman at that, and she was honoured for it. And if we take risks, sometimes it won't go brilliantly, and other times, though, God will honour us, and we'll actually get the reward that we deserve, that God thinks we deserve. So thank you for listening. Thank you for meeting my cat, and I shall be speaking soon on a different topic. Okay, bye.